Hi guys, it's Dawn here. I'm coming on behalf of the Eureka Springs Carnegie Library. Some of you know me as Miss Dawn because I've done some story times at your schools maybe, but I'm here to talk books and I'm so excited about the summer reading program just getting started. The theme is Imagine Your Story, and I know a lot of you have been enjoying the online story times, listening to Miss April and some other people share stories with you. But some of you are readers and you want to read your own books. And now that summer reading has started and you want to record some minutes, what do you read? Do you need some ideas? Well, I've got some great chapter books for you. So I'm just going to share a few with you here today. And I'm not going to read them to you. I'm just going to tell you about them, get you excited about them, I hope, and then you can get them from the Eureka Springs Public Library. So first of all, since the theme is Imagine Your Story, it has a lot to do with fantasy and fairy tales. And one of my favorite chapter books is part of a series, and it's called The Magic Thief. And it's by Sarah Prenias. It is, like I said, it's a series, which I love reading series because then if I like the first one, I know there's more and I can read more about that character. So in this story, the main character, whose name is Khan, he's not your normal hero. He lives in London a long time ago, and he's an orphan, and he's a pickpocket, which means he makes his living and he survives on the streets by stealing things out of people's pockets. Well, one day he makes a huge mistake and he picks the wrong pocket. Let me just read you the very first part of the first chapter to give you an idea of what happens. So, chapter 1 starts, "A thief is a lot like a wizard. I have quick hands and I can make things disappear. But then I stole the wizard's locus mechalicus and nearly disappeared myself forever." So what's a locus mechalicus? Well, it's a special stone, a very special stone, that has some magic powers. Here's a picture. You can see the wizard whose pocket he picked. And it's magic in a way that shouldn't be in the hands of a pickpocket. It gets him into a lot of trouble, and he has to find a way to kind of repay this wizard and get back in his good graces. This fairy tale has a few pictures, which I also like. The other thing I like about this story in this series has a map in the front. I don't know what it is, but I love books that have maps. Allows me to feel like I understand what the character's going through and follow him on his journey a little bit better. So this is a map at the very beginning of the story, a map of the city or the area called Wellmet. That is a very important part of this story. So if you want to follow Khan's adventures and find out what happens after he picks the pocket of this wizard and how he becomes eventually this wizard's apprentice and learns from him, you'll want to check out The Magic Thief. Love this book. Another kind of fairy tale centered story, again a series which I love, is called The Sisters Grimm. And the very first book in the series, The Sisters Grimm, is called The Fairy Tale Detectives. Now, you might recognize the name Grimm from the Grimm brothers, who were German brothers who collected fairy tales and folk tales hundreds of years ago and put them together and shared them with people. And they all became known as Grimm's fairy tales. Well, in this story, in this series, these girls, whose names are Sabrina and Daphne Grimm, they are related to the brothers Grimm, and they have some interesting events in their lives. Their parents go missing, unexplained. They have an unexplained disappearance. They have a grandmother come forward and claim them. I love that there's a few pictures in this book as well. And they're not so sure about this granny and what her motives are and if she really is their grandmother. But they have multiple adventures. Every book in the series involves them having to solve a fairy tale mystery. That's why they're called the fairy tale detectives. In this one specifically, the very first one, they have to figure out how to get rid of this guy, a giant that comes into the village and is trying to destroy it. So the Sisters Grimm are such great heroines. Their stories are full of adventure and fantastical creatures, and each one is a story of its own. But the series in general, I think, is fantastic. Such great heroes, the Sisters Grimm. Also, do you like dragon stories? I love dragon stories. One of my favorites is a newer one called Dragon Slippers. Okay, so when I first saw this title, I thought, is it slippers that a dragon wears? Or is it slippers made out of a dragon? got me really curious. Love the cover and the title. But actually what really hooked me, the very first sentence. One of the best first sentences of any chapter books I've read. And I want to see what you think. Here's the first sentence. It was my aunt who decided to give me to the dragons. What? Give you to the dragons? Are these evil dragons? Good dragons? I had to read more, so that's a really good hook. Well, in this story, the main character's name is Creel, and her aunt does sacrifice her to the dragons, but she doesn't sit around and wait to be rescued. She takes matters into her own hands, rescues herself. She makes a bargain with the dragon that involves these beautiful blue slippers. And as she goes about her way and continues her journey home, these slippers end up being way more than shoes. And she becomes an amazing hero of her own and includes some other friendly dragons. But great story, great story. Dragon slippers, if you like to read dragon stories. And lastly, I have to finish with one of my all-time favorites. Of course, I always say that they're all my favorites because I love them all, but I'm such a lover of fantasy and fairy tale chapter books. Maybe you've heard of Peter and the Starcatchers. It actually has been made into a Broadway musical, which I haven't seen, but the book and the series, again, another series, is amazing. It's written by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson, and it's the story, you guys know Peter Pan, right? Do you like the story of Peter Pan? I mean, who doesn't? It's got pirates and mermaids and fairies and Indians and adventure and everything you could think of. And Peter and the Starcatcher is the same. But it's the story of Peter before he becomes Peter Pan, when he's still just a normal boy, an orphan, but a normal, regular boy, before he meets the other lost boys, and before he meets Tinkerbell. This is the story of Peter before. And in this series, you'll recognize some of the characters. Their names may be slightly different, but let me just read you a description here of one of the, in fact, the main villain in this story, and see if you can recognize who this is, if it sounds familiar to you. Far from the wharf, well across the bay, and almost to the open sea, was a tangle of rocks so treacherous that no captain familiar with these waters would sail his ship there. Over the years, many ships had struck these rocks and sunk. They lay in pieces, scattered everywhere. It was the perfect place to hide a ship. But there was a ship in there now, and the huge rocks, long and low, black as coal, with 3 masts pointing toward the sky like skeleton fingers. On the foredeck stood 2 men, one squat and one tall. "Can you see her?" said the squat man. He wore a striped shirt and blue wool pants that didn't quite reach his ankles. His blistered bare feet were dark as tar. "Not yet," replied the tall man, squinting through the spyglass. He was a strikingly unpleasant figure, with a pock-marked face and a large red nose like a prized turnip glued to his face. His long black hair, greasy from years without washing, stained the shoulders of the red uniform coat he'd stolen from a Navy sailor on the high seas just before escorting that wretched soul over the side of the ship. He had dark, deep-set, piercingly black eyes, overshadowed by eyebrows so bushy that he had to brush them away to see through the glass. But his most prominent feature was a thick growth of hair on his upper lip, long and black, lovingly maintained, measuring nearly a foot between its waxed and pointed tips. It was this feature that gave him his name, the most feared name on the sea, Black Stash. Who do you think that might be in relation to the Peter Pan story that you know? Peter and the Starcatchers. Lots of adventure on the high seas. It involves a mysterious trunk on Black Stash's ship that contains a treasure unlike any other you could imagine. So what is this treasure? What does Peter have to do with protecting it? How do they get themselves out of this treacherous journey? You'll have to read Peter and the Starcatchers. And in addition to the book, we also have it on audio. So if you like to listen to books, if you have a CD player in your car, or you listen to them at home, we have a huge selection at the library of books on audio CDs. And this is a really, really good one. So if you're interested in any of these books or anything else that we can look up for you, let us know. Call us at the library, have Mom or Dad help you go online, find some of these chapter books, and reserve them. We'll get them to you on curbside pickup, and you can get reading. Imagine your story and keep reading all summer. See you soon.